Remiss if I didn't discharge right now one personal debt of gratitude. Thank you for your prayers. Nancy and I have felt their presence many times in many ways. And believe me, for us, they've made all the difference. The other day, in the East Room of the White House at a meeting there, someone asked me whether I was aware of all the people out there who were praying for the president. And I had to say, yes, I am. I've felt it. I believe in intercessionary prayer. But I couldn't help but say to that questioner after he'd asked the question that, or at least say to them that if sometimes when he was praying he got a busy signal, it was just me in there ahead of him. I think I understand how Abraham Lincoln felt when he said, I have been driven many times to my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go. From the joy and the good feeling of this conference, I go to a political reception. Now, I don't know why, but that bit of scheduling reminds me of a story, which I'll share with you. An evangelical minister and a politician arrived at Heaven's Gate one day together. And St. Peter, after doing all the necessary formalities, took them in hand to show them where their quarters would be. And he took them to a small single room with a bed, a chair, and a table, and said this was for the clergyman. And the politician was a little worried about what might be in store for him. And he couldn't believe it then when St. Peter stopped in front of a beautiful mansion with lovely grounds, many servants, and told him that these would be his quarters. And he couldn't help but ask. He said, but wait, there's something wrong. How do I get this mansion while that good and holy man only gets a single room? And St. Peter said, you have to understand how things are up here. We got thousands and thousands of clergy. You're the first politician who ever made it. But I don't want to contribute to a stereotype. So I tell you, there are a great many God-fearing, dedicated, noble men and women in public life, present company included. And yes, we need your help to keep us ever mindful of the ideas and the principles that brought us into the public arena in the first place. The basis of those ideals and principles is a commitment to freedom, personal liberty, that itself is grounded in the much deeper realization that freedom prospers only where the blessings of God are avidly sought and humbly accepted. The American experiment in democracy rests on this
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us on this Johnny Cash Friday. My goodness, folks, yesterday was breathtaking. I don't know if you guys watched it. I watched it live. Actually, I listened to it. I was traveling. I was on the road, and I listened to most of the Kavanaugh I actually listened to the entire 45-minute opening statement by Brett Kavanaugh. It was absolutely gut-wrenching. It was breathtaking. If you haven't heard it, we're going to listen to a little bit of it here in a minute. I guess yesterday morning I listened to Christine Blasey Ford, and I listened to her testimony. What an absolute... Well, some people called it a circus. I had somebody call me and say, I've never seen more of a waste of taxpayer money in my life. I don't necessarily know if I would go that far. But what I would say is there was no proof. There was no evidence provided. There was, and if you listen to Judge Kavanaugh and what Judge Kavanaugh said, he was clear. He said, listen to the people who were allegedly there when this assault took place. They say, one of the women says they don't even know who I am. Listen to the people who are not corroborating this alleged event that took place. One of the things Judge Kavanaugh said was, he said, I'm not denying that something, didn't happen to Dr. Ford at some time, someplace, somewhere, but it was not me. I am innocent of these charges. He was angry at times, rightfully so. I thought his response, his passion, his anger at times, his emotion at times, if you're one of these people out there that think that it was too much, that he went over the top, then you don't understand how over the top the media has been with this. Because I think it was an equal opposing reaction to where the media has put us, where they have brought us, basically how half the country is divided right now. And I think it was just an amazing day. Listen, I think maybe, quite possibly, and I can't believe I'm saying this might have been the day Senator Lindsey Graham saved the country. But in saying all that, it's Johnny Cash Friday, ladies and gentlemen. There we go. For those of you who don't know, Johnny Cash Friday, a day where we try to listen to as much Johnny Cash music as we possibly can, while at the same time peppering in the news and events of the day. Hey, if you see a state legislator, ask him for a loan. That's now the running joke. And now it's got to be the right one, though. If you see somebody in Republican leadership, ask him if you can borrow some money, like a zero interest, zero payment loan. Like, you don't ever have to pay it back. It'd be fun. The phone number, by the way, if you want to call or text this morning, 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Also, up at Facebook.com/Conduit News. Man, I love this song here. All right, so let's kind of get right into it. The real question today, for those of you who are political news junkies and you're already caught up with pretty much everything that happened yesterday, I'm going to go over here in a minute. But the real question this morning is, did the events of yesterday, does Kavanaugh have the votes? Well, there is a zero hedge post up that says, according to a Senate insider, that Kavanaugh votes have been secured. We do know that, Drudge was saying that, Bob Corker is now a yes. It's expected that some of the more moderate Republicans, Flake, Murkowski, Collins, Manchin, are all going to vote together. According to this report, Senators Flake from Arizona, Collins of Maine, Murkowski, Alaska, and Manchin, a Democrat from West Virginia, are expected to vote in favor of Kavanaugh. All the Republicans are voting yes. Also in the rumor mill, several Democrats may break ranks and back Kavanaugh. That's the ball game, folks. This according to a townhall.com report. If there are more Democrats than Manchin that break ranks and vote for him, it's because they know the left has overplayed their hand. What we really should have done here is start a countdown. How long will it take for the left to begin to riot if they go ahead and confirm Brett Kavanaugh? Because, in my opinion, I could be wrong, I think that's what's going to happen. I think there's going to be violence from the left. I'm worried about it. if they go ahead and confirm Brett Kavanaugh. Well, folks, George Soros and the gang have had basically all of these protesters ready to take to the streets anyway, just in case President Trump fires Rod Rosenstein. They've been planning that for a long time. And they almost got basically got teed up at the beginning of this week. Of course, President Trump did not have his meeting with Rod Rosenstein as planned. Thursday's proceedings saw a roller coaster of emotions from both Brett Kavanaugh and his accuser, Christine Blasey Ford, who claims he groped her at a high school party in 1982. That's there are, depending on which media outlet you read. I mean, this is a Zero Hedge article. You have people that say Christine Blasey Ford claims that Brett Kavanaugh groped her in high school in 1982. You have other people that say Brett Kavanaugh committed sexual assault on Christine Blasey Ford in 1982. You have other people that say that Christine Blasey Ford accuses Brett Kavanaugh of sexual misconduct. So it's groping, sexual assault, sexual misconduct. There's a lot of different takes on exactly what the accusation is anyway. Did you see what Tom Cotton tweeted? I had this one up on my Twitter. Hang on a second. Let me pull it up. I seem to have misplaced it. I retweeted this yesterday evening, last night sometime. Tom Cotton essentially. Of course, the left can't stand, Tom Cotton because he tells, he just gives his honest opinion. Let me see here. Where can I see? I had it right here in front of me, and now it has vanished. Sometimes, here we go. Judge Kavanaugh, he said, gave compelling testimony with specific and detailed recollection. His testimony is corroborated by multiple other statements and evidence. The Democrats' disgraceful smear campaign of character assassination must come to an end. It's time for the Senate to vote. That's Senator Tom Cotton on that. Oh, my goodness. It was breathtaking. Let's get to some audio of it, right? Let's start with Judge Kavanaugh himself, Joe. We have this YouTube video here that was put up by Fox News, and let's start at the top here. Go ahead. The Kavanaugh one. We want the first one right there. Start right there where I queued it up there.
And listen to the witnesses who allegedly were at this event 36 years ago. Listen to Miss Kaiser. She does not know me. I was not at the party described by Dr. Ford. This confirmation process has become a national disgrace. The Constitution gives the Senate an important role in the confirmation process, but you have replaced advice and consent with search and destroy. Since my nomination in July, there's been a frenzy on the left to come up with something, anything, to block my confirmation. Shortly after I was nominated, the Democratic Senate leader said he would, quote, oppose me with everything he's got. A Democratic senator on this committee publicly referred to me as evil. Evil. Think about that word. And said that those who supported me were, quote, complicit in evil. Another Democratic senator on this committee said, quote, Judge Kavanaugh is your worst nightmare. A former head of the Democratic National Committee said, quote, Judge Kavanaugh will threaten the lives of millions of Americans for decades to come. I understand the passions of the moment, but I would say to those senators, your words have meaning. Millions of Americans listened carefully to you. Given comments like those, is it any surprise that people have been willing to do anything to make any physical threat against my family, to send any violent email to my wife, to make any kind of allegation against me and against my friends, to blow me up and take me down? You sowed the wind For decades to come,
He's-
I fear that the whole country will reap the whirlwind.
I think he's looking right at Dianne Feinstein, by the
The
way.
behavior of several of the Democratic members of this committee at my hearing a few weeks ago was an embarrassment. But at least it was just a good old-fashioned attempt at borking. Those efforts didn't work. When I did at least okay enough at the hearings that it looked like I might actually get confirmed, a new tactic was needed. Some of you were lying in wait and had it ready. This first allegation was held in secret for weeks by a Democratic member of this committee and by staff. It would be needed only if you couldn't take me out on the merits. When it was needed, this allegation was unleashed and publicly deployed over Dr. Ford's wishes. And then, as no doubt was expected, if not planned, came a long series of false last-minute smears designed to scare me and drive me out of the process before any hearing occurred. Crazy stuff. Gangs, illegitimate children, fights on boats in Rhode Island. All nonsense, reported breathlessly and often uncritically by the media. This has destroyed my family and my good name. A good name built up through decades of very hard work and public service at the highest levels of the American government. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit, fueled with apparent pent-up anger about President Trump and the 2016 election, fear that has been unfairly stoked about my judicial record, revenge on behalf of the Clintons, and millions of dollars in money from outside left-wing opposition groups.
Stop.
This
Revenge on behalf of the Clintons. I heard that one. I couldn't believe he said it. People who claim to be conservative, take note. This is the type of boldness. Ronald Reagan said, paint in bold colors, not in pale pastels. In terms of him defending himself and his character, this is exactly what he needed to do. Again, there are some on the left, of course, that criticize him because he did get emotional when he talked about his daughter and how his daughter prayed for Dr. Ford the other night. Folks, this was every bit deserved. His forcefulness, his boldness was warranted, and it at least was equal to the sensational left-wing media and what they have been doing. Again, like he said, reporting breathlessly, uncritically, these allegations. You have Democratic senators like Chuck Schumer, who is an attorney, that says he doesn't have any presumption of innocence. No. What does that even mean? How in the world do you have a United States senator that says the accused is not presumed innocent? Yeah, he is, and that's what I'm saying. He's an attorney, and it was, this whole process was exposed yesterday. I hope there were Democrats and even some people, who might even consider themselves leftists watching, who thought, I wonder if there were any who thought, wow, yeah, this is wrong. It was Andrew Breitbart who he started on his path to conservatism when he saw what the left did to Justice Clarence Thomas. And the high-tech lynching that went on with him. And that was like the first moment with Andrew Breitbart, the late Andrew Breitbart, who said, something's not right with these Democrats here. This is, this is an African-American, be the first African-American on the Supreme Court, and it's a very big deal. And yet, just because he happens to be a conservative, the Democrats destroyed him and destroyed his reputation to this day. To this day, you had some guy on CNN the other day say that, well, we've already got one sexual predator sitting on the Supreme Court, referring to Clarence Thomas. And now, so if Judge Kavanaugh gets confirmed, the left is going to do the same thing. They're going to do this for decades. He's right. If you're Kavanaugh, you had no choice but to come out and forcefully attempt to get on the Supreme Court because they're going to trash you the rest of your life regardless. The telephone number is 870-275-9799. This was a day that I think is going to, it was a historic day yesterday. And, when Christine Blasey Ford was giving her testimony, there are these photos, these very, very telling, revealing photos of the Democrats, Feinstein, Cory Booker, Blumenthal, others, just smiling and laughing at what they were doing to this man. And they did not expect, the left did not expect Brett Kavanaugh to come out and do what he did. They did not expect they were taken aback. Dianne Feinstein was put in her place. Oh, by the way, listen, on Monday when all this was going on, I came out and I told you that, Dianne Feinstein, if we're just going to start throwing out accusations and you're presumed guilty until you're proven innocent, then Dianne Feinstein is a Chinese spy because she had a person working in her office for 20 years. Her and her husband made a ton of money off of China. The FBI told her, she says she didn't know. But you know what? I don't think so. I think she's working for the Chinese. I mean, you can make an argument that we're in a trade war with China, and they have every incentive for Dianne Feinstein to try to torpedo Trump's political clout and let him take a domestic political hit so that maybe Trump will listen and will go back on his tariffs. You see how I just concocted a story there? Now, it actually makes a lot of sense if you think about it. I actually do think that Dianne Feinstein is basically working for the government of China as a United States Senator. I do believe that, just so you know. Because if you go back and track the financial trails for decades, and now that we know you had somebody that the FBI caught who was really, getting inside information from China in direction. But my point is, I would just tell you there's some people who are now starting to speculate exactly what I was kind of joking about on Monday, But anyway. All right, we're going to take a break, and we appreciate you guys listening. It's Johnny Cash Friday. Enjoy the music and enjoy the presidential speeches, those of you watching on YouTube and across other platforms. Back in a minute.
Its discovery was the great triumph of our founding fathers, voiced by William Penn, when he said, "If we will not be governed by God, we must be governed by tyrants." Explaining the inalienable rights of men, Jefferson said, "The God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time." And it was George Washington who said that of all the dispositions and habits which lead to political prosperity, religion and morality are indispensable supports. And finally, that shrewdest of all observers of American democracy, Alexis de Tocqueville, put it eloquently after he had gone on a search for the secret of America's greatness and genius. And he said, "Not until I went into the churches of America and heard her pulpits aflame with righteousness did I understand the greatness and the genius of America." America is good. And if America ever ceases to be good, America will cease to be great. Well, I'm pleased to... I'm pleased to be here today with you who are keeping America great by keeping her good. Only through your work and prayers, and those of millions of others, can we hope to survive this perilous century and keep alive this experiment in liberty, this last best hope of man. I want you to know that this administration is motivated by a political philosophy that sees the greatness of America in you, her people, and in your families, churches, neighborhoods, communities, the institutions that foster and nourish values like concern for others and respect for the rule of law under God. Now, I don't have to tell you that this puts us in opposition to, or at least out of step with, a prevailing attitude of many who have turned to a modern-day secularism, discarding the tried and time-tested values upon which our very civilization is based. no matter how well-intentioned, their value system is radically different from that of most Americans. And while they proclaim that they're freeing us from superstitions of the past, they've taken upon themselves the job of superintending us by government rule and regulation. Sometimes their voices are louder than ours, but they are not yet a majority. An example of that vocal superiority is evident in the controversy now going on in Washington. Since I've been involved, I've been waiting to hear from the parents of young America. How far are they willing to go in giving to government their prerogatives as parents? Let me state the case as briefly and simply as I can. An organization of citizens sincerely motivated, deeply concerned about the increase in
All right, it's Johnny Cash Friday. On Facebook, we have Amy on Facebook, facebook.com/Conduit News. She writes, I don't believe for a minute that Feinstein's office didn't leak that letter to the press. You know, interestingly enough, Feinstein is now out there saying, she was called out. I mean, she was called out by Lindsey Graham, which we're going to get to in the next half hour. She was, called out by Kavanaugh. It was really amazing to watch. I mean, they were really put in their place yesterday. But her office is now saying that they didn't leak the letter to the press, that Christine Blasey Ford was hounded by the press. Well, Guy Benson tweeted that if that's true and it wasn't from Feinstein, then that contradicts now Christine Blasey Ford's direct testimony, that there's now a conflict with how all this started, depending on how the press got involved. I mean, you do have to say this: the fact that if she wanted to remain anonymous and they wanted to do the investigation behind closed doors and everything else, that's not valuable to the left. They needed another Anita Hill. They know what the optics look like. They know it's a Me Too movement. And so when Lindsey Graham and others look at Feinstein and said, you guys don't care anything about Christine Blasey Ford and her story, you guys needed a face. You needed a female face, and you needed it to be public. Because if this had all been done behind closed doors, guess what would have happened? And Dianne Feinstein and the lawyers knew it. They would have found out that there would have been sworn statements from the other people who were allegedly there, and those sworn statements under penalty of perjury, under penalty of federal crime, would have said, we don't know. One of them would have said, the other girl, I don't know who Brett Kavanaugh is, and the other guy would have said, again, under penalty of perjury, I don't remember this, I don't know what she's talking about. This was 35 years ago. I'm submitting my testimony under, and guess what? If you can't corroborate an alleged event, an alleged crime, then there's not even enough. There would not even be enough for a search warrant, let alone charges, based on what we heard yesterday from Christine Blasey Ford. Folks, we're up against a hard break. Back in a minute.
Legitimate births and abortions involving girls well below the age of consent. Some time ago established a nationwide network of clinics to offer help to these girls and hopefully alleviate this situation. Now again, let me say, I do not fault their intent. However, in their well-intentioned effort, these clinics have decided to provide advice and birth control drugs and devices to underage girls without the knowledge of their parents. For some years now, the federal government has helped with funds to subsidize these clinics. In providing for this, the Congress decreed that every effort would be made to maximize parental participation. Nevertheless, the drugs and devices are prescribed without getting parental consent or giving notification after they've done so. Girls termed sexually active, and that has replaced the word promiscuous, are given this help in order to prevent illegitimate birth or abortion. Well, we have ordered clinics receiving federal funds to notify the parents such help has been given. One of the nation's One of the nation's leading newspapers has created the term squeal rule in editorializing against us for doing this, and we're being criticized for violating the privacy of young people. A judge has recently granted an injunction against an enforcement of our rule. I've watched TV panel shows discuss this issue, seen columnists pontificating on our error, but no one seems to mention morality as playing a part in the subject of sex. Is all of Judeo-Christian tradition wrong? Are we to believe that something so sacred can be looked upon as a purely physical thing with no potential for emotional and psychological harm? And isn't it the parents' right to give counsel and advice to keep their children from making mistakes that may affect their entire lives? Many of us in government would like to know what parents think about this intrusion in their family by government. We're going to fight in the courts. The right of parents and the rights of family take precedence over those of Washington-based bureaucrats and social engineers. But the fight against parental notification is really only one example of many attempts to water down traditional values and even abrogate the original terms of American democracy. Freedom prospers when religion is vibrant and the rule of law under God is acknowledged. When our founding fathers passed the First Amendment, they sought to protect churches from government interference. They never intended to construct a wall of hostility between government and the concept of religious belief itself. The evidence of this permeates our history and our government. The Declaration of Independence mentions the Supreme Being no less than 4 times. In God We Trust is engraved on our coinage. The Supreme Court opens its proceedings with a religious invocation, and the members of Congress open their sessions with a prayer. I just happen to believe the school children of the United States are entitled to the same privileges as Supreme Court Last year, I sent to Congress a constitutional amendment to restore prayer to public schools.
So we'll make that.
Already this session, there's growing bipartisan support for the amendment, and I am calling on the Congress to act speedily to pass it and to let our children pray. Perhaps some of you being held during the student's own time. The First Amendment never intended to require
countdown to the snowflakes melting. That's what I'm sensing here anyway. We still don't know. I do have one report with townhall.com. Let me actually click on that Town Hall article there. Town Hall. Let's see if they've updated it. Townhall.com breaking, we have the votes. Now, this was posted. A lot can change between 10:35 p.m. yesterday and 6:35 a.m. today. But they posted last night that the Senate does have the votes to confirm Judge Kavanaugh, or out of the committee, and that they're going to be voting at 9:30 Eastern time. So that'd be 8:30, 30 minutes after we end the program today. The committee will be voting, and I bet you there's going to be protests and everything else. Now, listen to this. If this happens, we now have the Daily Caller reporting that the left is then going to pledge that if they take the House, they will find some way to investigate Brett Kavanaugh more and possibly impeach him. Is that what I've read here? Float if are they talking about impeachment of the president here? Hang on. Next step, Democrats pledge to investigate Kavanaugh, float impeachment if he's confirmed. Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh, according to the Daily Caller, might keep facing political attacks from the left even if he's confirmed. Kavanaugh faced an onslaught of attacks from Democrats. Brian Fallon, former press secretary on Hillary Clinton's unsuccessful 2016 presidential campaign, predicted Kavanaugh will not serve for life if confirmed. Fallon leads Demand Justice, a Democratic dark money group dedicated to opposing Kavanaugh's confirmation, and previously called for Kavanaugh to be impeached from his current position on the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals. So impeachment is what they're going to go for. So, yeah, if the Senate GOP ignores Dr. Blasey Ford and tries to muscle an attempted rapist into the Supreme Court, they will pay dearly this November. 2 senators up in 2020, Collins, Gardner, etc., will feel intense heat the next 2 years, and Kavanaugh will not serve for life. So that they're threatening to just continue the attacks. Here's the question, though. If Kavanaugh does get confirmed, will the left melt down, and will the protests commence? Now, if that happens, I think the GOP wins even bigger than they may win right now. And the reason I say that is because I don't think the Democrats realize at all how they have overplayed their hand. There are a lot of people that think what went on yesterday and what went on the last 10 days shows that the Democrat Party doesn't deserve power and certainly don't need power at this point. I mean, I saw some tweets and reports, and you never know, how accurate a tweet is. But I mean, some people are saying that they've been Democrats their entire life. They now know that Donald Trump isn't a Nazi and a KGB agent all at once. They realize that that's a lie. And the fact that the Democrats have done what they've done to Brett Kavanaugh and how they held the allegation, how they sat on the allegation, and then, of course, everything else that's happened with the sensationalist media, how they're now going to go to the polls and vote for Republicans this time. And I talked to a friend yesterday who said, a lot of people don't realize that there were some Republicans that didn't go vote for Donald Trump. Some people who maybe they weren't quite never Trumpers, but they were like, I'm not going to vote, and there's going to be some of those people that are going to come out and vote now because they're obviously going to vote for Trump now that they see that, his policies are working. And I mean, the Heritage Foundation of all people said he had a more successful first year than Ronald Reagan. So anyway, this is now that the Democrats they were embarrassed yesterday. Here's where the embarrassment took place. Are you ready for this? So I apologize. The YouTube video, CNN has the YouTube video. We also have Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham had his own YouTube video of his statement as well, but I didn't go with the Lindsey Graham video. I went with the CNN one because the CNN one cuts to a camera, too, where you see the look on Dianne Feinstein's face. Joe, go ahead and play this one. This is Lindsey Graham. And again, the reason we're using the CNN YouTube video here is just because of the look on Dianne Feinstein's face. They actually give you this second cut when Lindsey Graham a couple of times references Dianne Feinstein. Listen.
Are you aware that at 9:23 on the night of July the 9th, the day you were nominated to the Supreme Court by President Trump, Senator Schumer said, 23 minutes after your nomination, I will oppose Judge Kavanaugh's nomination with everything I have. I have a bipartisan, and I hope a bipartisan majority will do the same. The stakes are simply too high for anything less. Well, if you weren't aware of it, you are now. Did you meet with Senator Dianne Feinstein on August 20th?
I did meet with Senator Feinstein.
Did you know that her staff had already recommended a lawyer to Dr. Ford?
I did not know that.
Did you know that her and her staff had this allegations for over 20 days?
I did not know that at the time.
If you wanted an FBI investigation, you could have come to us. What you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. You've said that, not me.
Look at Dianne Feinstein's
You've got
face.
nothing to apologize for. When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsay said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical
Look at Feinstein's
sham
face.
since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Are you a gang rapist?
No.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham, that you knew about it and you held it. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are. God, I hate to say it, because these have been my friends.
Feinstein's face.
But let me tell you, when it comes to this, you're looking for a fair process. You came to the wrong town at the wrong time, my friend. Do you consider this a job interview?
The advice and consent role is like a job
You
interview.
consider that you've been through a job interview.
I've been through a process of advice and consent under the Constitution. Which
Would you say you've been through hell?
I've been through hell and then some.
This is not a job interview.
Yeah.
This is hell.
This
This is going to destroy the ability of good people to come forward because of this crap. Your high school yearbook. You have interacted with professional women all your life, not one accusation. You're supposed to be Bill Cosby when you're a junior and senior in high school. And all of a sudden you got over it. It's been my understanding that if you drug women and rape them for 2 years in high school, you probably don't stop. Here's my understanding. If you lived a good life, people would recognize it, like the American Bar Association has the gold standard. His integrity is absolutely unquestioned. He is the very circumspect in his personal conduct, harbors no biases or prejudices. He's entirely ethical, is a really decent person. He is warm, friendly, unassuming. He's the nicest person. The ABA. The one thing I can tell you, you should be proud of. Ashley, you should be proud of this, that you raised a daughter who had the good character to pray for Dr. Ford. To my Republican colleagues, if you vote no, you're legitimizing the most despicable thing I have seen in my time in politics. You want this seat? I hope you never get it. I hope you're on the Supreme Court. That's exactly where you should be. And I hope that the American people will see through this charade. And I wish you well, and I intend to vote for you, and I hope everybody who's fair-minded will.
It now said that when Lindsey Graham walked into the Republican conference after this, he got a standing ovation because of what he did. This may be the day. I can't believe I'm saying this. The day that Lindsey Graham saved America. And I mean that just by, getting a solid 5-4 majority when it comes to a limited government constitutional originalist intent in terms of deciding things. So much here. Lindsey Graham, I haven't been a fan of Lindsey Graham. I know many of you out there haven't been a fan of Lindsey Graham. Right? I told Joe, I said, Lindsey Graham's kind of, he's kind of been a warmonger, and kind of been a warmonger is like, that's an understatement. But here recently, he certainly has been someone, and you know why? You say what you want to about Lindsey Graham, and I have disagreed with him verily, over the years. But he did vote for Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor because he says President Obama won. This is not supposed to be a political process. This is what he always said. It drove me nuts. But this is, this is not supposed to be a political process. This is supposed to evaluate a judge's qualifications. Was Elena Kagan qualified? Lindsey Graham said, I think so. Sonia Sotomayor, I think so. Obama brought us qualified nominees, right? When George W. Bush nominated Harriet Miers, now this is just my memory. I wasn't really politically conscious back then. But when they withdrew the nomination because Harriet Miers supposedly, but it was a bipartisan consensus that she just wasn't qualified to get this position, and so she had to bow out. It's that and so love that idea or hate that idea. I mean, I personally understand. I think if you have the political power, use the political power. But hey, some people want to say no. The institution of the Senate, it's advise and consent. That's what the Constitution says. That's what we're going to do. And so Lindsey Graham votes for Elena Kagan and Sonia Sotomayor, these liberal justices, and because he stuck to that principle, if you want to call it that, the man is now trying to apply that same logic to the Dems, and he's furious that they're treating Kavanaugh like this, that they can't get him on any disqualification from a judicial standpoint. They disagree with his jurisprudence, but he is qualified, and so they hold on to the letter. They meet with Judge Kavanaugh, back on August. They've already recommended an attorney for Christine Blasey Ford, and he just absolutely shines. He shines. And I'm telling you, I was amazed. I listened to that on the radio yesterday as I was driving. Couldn't believe how much sense Lindsey Graham made. I mean, I don't mean that as an insult to him. I'm just saying it was breathtaking. It was breathtaking. That's how I would describe the entire hearings yesterday, especially Judge Kavanaugh's emotion. I mean, there were times I wasn't watching it. I was listening to it. There were times when, he was getting choked up that I was like making verbal noises in my car and being like, "Come on." I was saying to myself, "Don't cry yourself out of confirmation." But again, if you go back and actually watch it, his reaction is completely warranted. And if you don't think it is, then you haven't been paying attention to the sensationalist news media who are reporting these accusations, like Kavanaugh said, breathlessly, uncritically, people who are abandoning the idea that you are innocent until proven guilty, and that if all of this had been done behind closed doors, you could have protected Christine Blasey Ford's anonymity, and you would have known that the corroborating witnesses you would know that the witnesses do not corroborate what she said happened, and it would be a closed matter. But the Democrat Party, they had to have a public face in this day and age. They have to try to stop this because they know, number one, Roe versus Wade is in jeopardy. The genocide of 54 million babies and counting may be coming to an end in this country if Judge Kavanaugh gets on the Supreme Court. That's number one. Number two, and really expanding kind of a subpoint here, the left can't win legislative victories when they are honest about their agenda. They don't do it very often. They don't have these giant, landmark, not like, it just doesn't, they have to have the courts. They have to have an activist court. Even with Obamacare, that was a landmark victory for the left, but they had to lie to do it. The architect, Jonathan Gruber, said, well, we had to lie to the American people, to get it passed, but it was for their own good, right? They rely on activist judges to change the meaning of what laws are. And that's why this is also. So they know if Kavanaugh gets on there, and then if Ruth Bader Ginsburg is replaced, and you've got now you've got a solid 5'4", sometimes 6'3" is what you're going to have. I mean, if Ginsburg, you're going to have a solid, if she goes and gets replaced, you're going to have kind of a solid 6'3", 7'2", possible sometimes. I mean, this is huge. This is a big deal. And they know this, and that's why they're trying to fight it every step of the way. And it's not over yet. Now, again, I haven't seen, I'm looking here right now, I don't see any more updates as to what the vote count is. I think they are going to have the committee meeting later in the day at 8:30 Central Time. So be watching that. I'm sure there's going to be other radio shows and everything else that are going to be breaking in and bringing you that live updates concerning that. But townhall.com last night, September 27th, last night at 10:35, saying that they have the votes. This is Matt Vespa over at townhall.com. Writing that with the Senate Judiciary Committee holding a vote at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow Eastern, A Senate insider has told Town Hall that Kavanaugh has the votes to make it out of committee and the votes to be confirmed on the floor for a seat on the U.S. Supreme Court. Senators Flake, Collins, Murkowski, and Manchin, a Democrat, are expected to vote in favor of Kavanaugh. All the Republicans are voting yes. Also, in the rumor mill, several Democrats may break ranks and back Kavanaugh. That's ball game, folks. It was an intense and hellacious day, he writes, at the Senate Judiciary Committee. Christine Blasey Ford, the woman accusing Judge Brett Kavanaugh of an attempted rape while at a high school party, told her story of an alleged sexual assault. It was intense. It was emotional. And it still lacked evidence, witnesses, and other corroborating details. It's an unprovable allegation, which is what Democrats want. It allows them to delay and run out the clock on this nomination. The FBI investigation talking point has been beaten to death by Senate Democrats, another delay tactic that has been undercut by past remarks by none other than Senator Joe Biden. When he chaired the committee during the Clarence Thomas confirmation hearings, Biden famously said that FBI reports are inconclusive and should not be relied on during sexual misconduct allegations. Brett Kavanaugh testified later that afternoon, giving an emotional and fiery defense of his character and career after it had been under a sustained assault by the left for over a week. Kavanaugh said the allegations, all three of them, were false and have irreparably damaged his reputation and damaged his family life. He said this process has become a national disgrace, with Democrats replacing advise and consent with search and destroy. Kavanaugh needed to come out swinging. He needed to be tough, and he did that. And I'll say this again. Conservatives take note. Or people you claim to be conservatives take note. Did you see how bold and forceful he was in his defense? If more conservatives were like Judge Brett Kavanaugh, we would have a different political landscape than we do now. But people are sometimes afraid, I might be considered mean. I might be considered that I'm not a team player. And sometimes it comes up to it. You just got to stand up for what's right and what's wrong. And listen, he said that he doesn't doubt something happened to Christine Blasey Ford sometime, someplace, somewhere. He just says it wasn't him. It wasn't him is what he says. Now, if you listen to Christine Blasey Ford, she does sound sincere. Some people are alleging on the internet that she sounded coached when she was giving. I'm just telling you what people were saying, because every time she ended her sentence, she ended it by ending the last word. She would end it by finishing it by going up to and some people are claiming that was a tactic to appear more youthful. I'm just telling you what some people are saying out there. Saw that on Twitter. We're going to take a break. We'll be back in just a moment.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
government to discriminate against religious speech. Senators Denton and Hatfield have proposed legislation in the Congress on the whole question of prohibiting discrimination against religious forms of student speech. Such legislation could go far to restore freedom of religious speech for public school students. And I hope the Congress considers these bills quickly, and with your help, I think it's possible we could also get the constitutional amendment through the Congress this year. More than a decade ago, a Supreme Court decision literally wiped off the books of 50 states statutes protecting the rights of unborn children. Abortion on demand now takes the lives of up to 1.5 million unborn children a year. Human life legislation ending this tragedy will someday pass the Congress, and you and I must never rest until it does. Unless and until it can be proven that the unborn child is not a living entity, then its right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness must be protected. You may remember that when abortion on demand began, many, and indeed I'm sure many of you, warned that the practice would lead to a decline in respect for human life, that the philosophical premises used to justify abortion on demand would ultimately be used to justify other attacks on the sacredness of human life, infanticide or mercy killing. Tragically enough, those warnings proved all too true. Only last year, a court permitted the death by starvation of a handicapped infant. I have directed the Health and Human Services Department to make clear to every health care facility in the United States that the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 protects all handicapped persons.
Welcome back. Hey, when we come back, we're going to be talking with Mr. Josh Waters. Josh Waters is here. He's here in studio. We're going to be talking with him and Hannah Webb. She'll be calling in, so we're going to have a great discussion about this Follow the Money report. If you want to know what's going on in Arkansas or politics in general, you have to follow the money. Where is the campaign cash flowing? And that's where you can kind of see the direction, where the special interest, who are the kingmakers here in the state of Arkansas. We'll talk more about that when we come back. And then at the bottom of the next hour, State Representative Josh Miller. You know, I hear it's a popular joke now to just go up to, Senator Jim Hendren and ask him for a zero-interest loan. That's what I've heard. And you just go up, you just feel free. Just, hey, can I have some money? I mean, if you're going to give out loans, why not? Are there any other legislators who've been taking loans that we don't know about? I mean, seems to me we have kind of stumbled upon just the beginning of kind of a trail here that's going to lead us to even more legislators who have taken money. Back in a minute.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
Against discrimination based on handicaps, including infants. We have taken the further step of requiring that each and every recipient of federal funds who provides health care services to infants must post and keep posted in a conspicuous place a notice stating that discriminatory failure to feed and care for handicapped infants in this facility is prohibited by federal law. It also lists a 24-hour toll-free number so that nurses and others may report violations in time to save the infant's life. In addition, recent legislation introduced in the Congress by Representative Henry Hyde of Illinois not only increases restrictions on publicly financed abortions, it also addresses this whole problem of infanticide. I urge the Congress to begin hearings and to adopt legislation that will protect the right of life to all children, including the disabled or handicapped. Now, I'm sure that you must get discouraged at times, but you've done better than you know, perhaps. There's a great spiritual awakening in America. A renewal of the traditional values that have been the bedrock of America's goodness and greatness. One recent survey by a Washington-based research council concluded that Americans were far more religious than the people of other nations. 95% of those surveyed expressed a belief in God, and a huge majority believed the Ten Commandments had real meaning in their lives. And another study has found that an overwhelming majority of Americans disapprove of adultery, teenage sex, pornography, abortion, and hard drugs. And this same study showed a deep reverence for the importance of family ties and religious belief. I think the items that we've discussed here today must be a key part of the nation's political agenda. For the first time, the Congress is openly and seriously debating and dealing with the prayer and abortion issues, and that's enormous progress right there. I repeat, America is in the midst of a spiritual awakening and a moral renewal, and with your biblical keynote, I say today, yes, let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Now, obviously, much of this new political and social consensus I've talked about is based on a positive view of American history, one that takes pride in our country's accomplishments and record. But we must never forget that no government schemes are going to perfect man. We know that living in this world means dealing with what philosophers would call the phenomenology of evil, or as theologians would put it, the doctrine of sin. There is sin and evil in the world, and we're enjoined by Scripture and the Lord Jesus to oppose it with all our might. Our nation, too, has a legacy of evil with which it must deal. The glory of this land has been its capacity for transcending the moral evils of our past. For example, the long struggle of minority citizens for equal rights, once a source of disunity and civil war, is now a point of pride for all Americans. We must never go back. There is no room for racism, anti-Semitism, or other forms of ethnic and racial hatred in this country. I know that you've been horrified, as have I, by the resurgence of some hate groups preaching bigotry and prejudice. Use the mighty voice of your pulpits and the powerful standing of your churches to denounce and isolate these hate groups in our midst. The commandment given us is clear and simple. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. But whatever sad episodes exist in our past,
All right, folks, welcome to the program. Thanks so much for being with us today. The telephone number, if you want to call us or text us, is 870-275-9799. That's 870-275-9799. Hey, joining us in studio, hang on a second. We're going to get some headphones in here. Joining us in studio, we have Mr. Josh Waters is live in studio. So, Josh, it's always good to have you on, sir.
Hey, it's good to be here in studio with you, Paul.
I'm going to see here. We got your headphone situation. I'm going to hook it up right now. And let's see here. So, Josh, what brings you into town?
Well, actually, Monday night here in Jonesboro at the Barn Hills Buffet, the Northeast Arkansas Tea Party is meeting, and I'm going to be doing a presentation over there for Conduit for Action about that ballot issues that are going to be on the ballot. So I encourage anyone listening, if you're wondering about, okay, what am I going to have to vote on this November on the ballot issues? It's really confusing to keep up with it, especially with all the litigation around it too. But we'll be going over those in detail, the ballot issues.
Okay,
Monday
cool.
night.
And we got this Follow the Money report that Conduit for Commerce has come out with. I mean, it's amazing research. We talked about it earlier in the week, and now I've actually got the printout like right here in front of us. And it's just incredible the amount of healthcare money that is in here. Let's actually bring in on the phone. We've got Hannah Webb, who was a research assistant on this. She's been on Conservative Future before. She's also a law student. Hey, Hannah, are you there?
I'm here. It's good to be here, Paul.
Yeah. Hey, what was your reaction when you found some of this data out? You know, when it talks about the total contributions versus the amount of health care money that's pushing a lot of these establishment candidates.
Right. Well, it was interesting, the tangle web that they weaved for what we call the big establishment guys. But my biggest takeaway from it all is that big money is not just alive and well in Arkansas, but it's thriving here. And so I think with all the recent corruption that's come out, if you look in hindsight back at this report, the corruption that's come out since the primaries, it's no surprise. This culture has been allowed to foster, and these relationships have been allowed to be made. And people like us, we knew about the corruption before, and now it's all come to an ugly head. And then just looking at reports like this, it's easy to understand why.
That's a really good point. So the media, or I'm sorry, the corruption, the money is what I'm trying to say. It's the money, like she just said, Josh, that has kind of, fertilized the corruption. It's what has made the corruption profitable, I guess.
Yeah, and this is something Conduit has been doing for years, looking at, these financial reports and following the money. And we've kind of built up to this report and system we have now. But when you look back in primaries and stuff, this is something Conduit or Commerce in Action has been putting out there. When you look at primaries and you look and see, okay, who's getting money from what interest and how might that influence their vote, and looking back for incumbents, how that has influenced their vote. And so when you look at that over time, it's just really escalated, and the money has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think Hannah hit the nail on the head, about the corruption. If you follow some of the corrupt actors and you go look at their past financial givings, they got a lot of the same money from the same people. Does it mean everyone who took money from all those people are corrupt or doing bad things down there? But when you do follow the money, there's a correlation.
Yeah, you're saying it doesn't mean that, but it just says, okay,
It's, you need to, I think it's a transparent process for people to know.
Yeah.
Okay, did they give money to John Woods? Did they support, Jake Files and give money to them? Okay, why are they also giving money to, these people over here? What is the return on their investment that they're expecting?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that this report lays that out there for these various special interest groups. You can kind of see what they're expecting and the interest that they're expecting a vote for, passing some type of caps on damages. And when you look at the Healthcare Association and who they gave to and compare the votes on SJR 8 last session, I think you're going to see those line up pretty well.
Yeah, and so SJR 8 being the issue one, the bad tort reform that's on the ballot. Let's go back to Hannah here. So we talked about a little bit about the healthcare money, but what about Hannah? Some of the in this report, they actually it highlights specific players. From the Stevens Group to Stevens Group to the Walton family. to Arkansas Healthcare Association, DBH Consulting, Arkansas State Chamber of Commerce. Was it shocking to you that it's such a, actually really when you look at the numbers and who's affiliated, it's really a very small group that's influencing, who gets power and who doesn't? Hannah, what's your response?
So it was shocking to me, and I know several of the phone calls that me and Josh had while this report was going on. I was like, can you believe it? Did you know that all this was going on? This is crazy. But I think that amongst the people like us who keep up with it and understand what's going on down at the Marble Palace, we know that big money's being thrown around. We know that there's that big influence going on. But it's something totally different when you get your hands dirty with the specific numbers. It becomes a whole new reality when you put a sticker price on it. And I think on Wednesday, Josh made a great point about they don't care about the party lines. So these big players don't care if you're a Republican. They don't care if you're a Democrat. They're not donating because of principal issues. They're donating because they have an interest. They want that interest served. And they don't care which party is in power. They just go to the power.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I'm just looking at, there's this other page here. We've got big players who donated under $20,000, which is also telling. I mean, you just look at, but it's still really a small amount. I mean, when you think about it, it's still a small group of people. And I've been saying, the smaller the group of people are that are controlling things, the less people that understand how the system works, the more opportunity there is for corruption. And I think that's really what's going on here. When you have a small group of special interests, and now we're seeing all the corruption, I mean, is it reasonable to put the blame? Obviously, you got to put the blame on the legislators, the ones that are going to jail and everything else. I mean, they're the problem. But is it reasonable to blame, Josh, the special interests because of this?
Well, I think what you're getting at there is a really good point is, okay, when we talk about the idea of capture, when you're trying to capture, the legislature, and I would say the special interests are trying to do that. They're trying to make sure.
Seems like they've already got it.
Yeah, that's a very good point. But when they're trying to capture, it's a lot easier to capture, 11, 12, 13 people on a 20-member House committee, 5, 6 people on a Senate committee. $2,700 check to 5 or 6 people on that same committee to ensure no matter who's in power, no matter what party's in power, no matter who's the chair, no matter what the bill says, if they know $2,700 or $5,400 for a primary in general is on the line next election cycle, if I just vote for this one time on this one bill and I can go do some stuff over here and try to, I'll talk about this in my re-election campaign, but I'm going to always ensure when the rubber hits the road, I'm going to vote for that special interest. I think that's what you really see here, and I would encourage people to compare this to the voting record looking back last year and compare this going forward. Look at some of these issues and interests that these groups represent, and then follow how the elected officials who took that money, how they vote on that issue.
Let's go back to Hannah. We're talking with Josh Waters, Hannah Webb. It's a Conduit for Commerce Follow the Money report on the selected Republican primaries this last session. Really, really telling information about who's controlling things. Hannah, I'd like to ask you about just the concept of return on investment. I mean, the reason you have the Arkansas Healthcare Association giving $57,950 to candidates of interest is because they stand to make a lot more than $57,000. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, exactly. And, again, the wording was, if you want to know how the political winds blow, look at where the cash flows. Issue 1 is one of the biggest issues on the ballot this election cycle, whether the Supreme Court approves that it can be on there or not. And so that was their big skin in this game, and that was their big deal. And so it's no surprise that they donated tens of thousands of dollars to the cause. And that's not something that the everyday American, or the everyday Arkansan, for that matter, has to donate to a political campaign. If you're a small government-loving individual, you're not going to, well, you can't by campaign finance laws, but you don't have $50,000 to serve your limited government interest.
That's right. Josh, talk about that.
Well, I think that's right. And what you see, in this report, too, is kind of a breakdown of Commerce in Action. And when you think of that organization, they're actually fighting for limited government, fighting for small business, and they're not expecting a return on their investment other than for these conservative candidates who say, I'm for limited government, I'm for small business, I'm for shrinking the size and scope of government. Just do what they say, right? They don't have, it's not going to affect their bottom line. And I think that's really hard for people to grasp because they're thinking, well, anyone who gives, and we're talking about here, anyone who gives any money, they're expecting a return on their investment, right? Well, for all these other special interests, I would argue it's a financial or pecuniary gain for them and their employees, shareholders, that kind of thing. And for Commerce in Action, it's liberty, it's limited government. And I think it's always going to be hard for people to believe that, but it's been shown year after year. Yeah, sure.
Continue. It's been shown.
It's been shown year after year. The candidates that Commerce in Action has supported, Commerce in Action or Conduit, they're not going down there saying, okay, pass a special law to benefit, person A or person B or Conduit. They're asking people and holding them accountable with their votes on how they vote on economic freedom. Did it shrink or grow the size of government? Did it increase or decrease dependency on government? And I think that's hard for people to maybe, like you said, they're skeptical.
Yeah.
But I think there's a proven track record, and this shows it even more so when you compare the interests.
If the group that proclaims to support liberty, let's instead of carve outs for this business, why don't we just lower everything and treat all businesses the same? There are groups out there that claim that. Conduit is one of those groups and means it. There is no financial gain from that. But everybody else is using the wheels of government, from what it looks like, to get something from the government, whether it's a favorable law that enables them to make money, or in some cases, you have people getting direct funding from the government. Either way, they're then expected to tie the portion of that money in order to keep the gravy train going to specific political action committees. Now, feel free, either one of you jump in here. The political action, situation. We heard in some of these primaries, how bad political action committees are, but it was only those that are funded by limited government conservatives. The political action committees that are funded by Little Rock and the status quo, those are perfectly fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, this goes back really to the situation we have now with political action committees is because of convicted felon John Woods. He passed a law in the ethics amendment. It made it illegal for small businesses or others to give directly to a campaign. And so what they have to do now is give to a political action committee who can then donate to a campaign. And so, that kind of muddies the waters and trying to figure out, and that's kind of what we tried to do here. Okay, this political action committee is entity, X, but when you look at the business interests or interests represented on their filings, okay, what businesses are then involved? And you can glean what interest is involved. And so when you look at it that way, it's, there's nothing nefarious about it. That's the law. And so but what you said, when you look at the political action committees and compare, what is the interest represented? Liberty versus some type of special interest gain. And I know when we're working on this together with Hannah, I first want to thank her for doing a lot of great work on this and getting these numbers and working with us. And also want to give a shout out to Alice Norman, who did a lot of the design work on this, and also Conduit co-founder Brenda Vassar-Taylor. It really was a team effort to get this out there and to put it out there for people. But Paul, one thing you did say was talking about how the impact on small business. I was talking to a small business owner yesterday, and he was telling me a story about how he got this letter from the state about how he owed use tax. For basically in his restaurant, they thought maybe he was getting around the system of paying sales tax for meals that are provided to employees. Mm-hmm. Well, he called him up, and they're like, no, okay, I guess, that really didn't happen. And another guy I was talking to last night as well said similar thing happened with his property tax. They sent a letter saying you owe X amount. He called, and they said, okay, no, we'll take it off. And so my comment is what you're seeing is, the government is banking on 40, 50, 60, 70% of people just, okay, I'll pay this because I got a letter from the state. They're not questioning. They're not calling in. And I think that's a real problem.
That is a real problem. Yeah. Looking at the methodology here, if you go to like one of the first pages of the report, and this is the Follow the Money report, to understand who funded selected 2018 State House Republican primary elections, Conduit for Commerce collected contribution records from the Arkansas Secretary of State. These donations were then analyzed, cross-referencing PAC filings, lobbyist filings, and other research of the individuals and entities contributing. Hannah, that sounds like a pretty complicated process.
It is a pretty complicated process, and it's very time-consuming. So, yes, all this information is out there for the public. You can go online just like I did, download the spreadsheets from the Secretary of State website, and then you yourself can go into the portal they have set up to look up all the ethics filings for the PACs and see who their officers are, and see who the lobbyists represent, and so on and so forth. But this was an hours upon hours project. They give you all the raw data in essentially no organization and no form at all. And so, yes, it is public information, but you've got to have somebody like Conduit for Commerce come in and make it make sense. Because if you're an average 8 to 5 parent with responsibilities, this isn't a project that you can tackle and make any sense of in a timely and efficient manner.
That's a really good point. And so what we have here is a tool. It's a snapshot of where we are, where we were this year. And, again, Josh, I'll give you the last word. What we have here is we got a small group of people who are controlling. You know, they try to claim that conservatives are trying to control the legislature. Well, if that's the case, I mean, we're not doing a very good job because, I mean, the special interests are really controlling what happens.
Yeah, you know, and when you look even into more detail on this, you can see, and he's doing a good job showing, okay, who's giving in and out of district? Is money coming from out of state? You know, all these questions that you wonder about, like, oh, I wonder why they voted that way. You know, that's what we encourage people to see is to compare it. And so, again, I want to thank Hannah for her work and Conduit for Commerce for continuing to put out this information. It's really important, people, and would encourage people to go online to conduitforcommerce.org and donate to help support this information getting out there to the public.
Yeah, because it does take money to do all this. Well, Hannah, you have a great weekend, okay?
You too. Thank you, Paul.
And
thanks, Hannah.
Yeah, and we appreciate you, Josh Waters, for coming on. Hannah Webb and Josh Waters, everybody. We're going to take a break. It's Johnny Cash Friday. I'm going to check the headlines. The latest news I had on Kavanaugh, folks, was that they look like they have the votes, according to a townhall.com piece in committee and on the full Senate floor. We'll tell you more about that when we come back.
Any objective observer must hold a positive view of American history, a history that has been the story of hopes fulfilled and dreams made into reality. Especially in this century, America has kept alight the torch of freedom, but not just for ourselves, but for millions of others around the world. And this brings me to my final point today. During my first press conference as president, in answer to a direct question, I pointed out that as good Marxist-Leninists, the Soviet leaders have openly and publicly declared that the only morality they recognize is that which will further their cause, which is world revolution. I think I should point out I was only quoting Lenin, their guiding spirit, who said in 1920 that they repudiate all morality that proceeds from supernatural ideas, that's their name for religion, or ideas that are outside class conceptions. Morality is entirely subordinate to the interests of class war, and everything is moral that is necessary for the annihilation of the old exploiting social order and for uniting the proletariat. Well, I think the refusal of many influential people to accept this elementary fact of Soviet doctrine illustrates an historical reluctance to see totalitarian powers for what they are. We saw this phenomenon in the 1930s. We see it too often today. This doesn't mean we should isolate ourselves and refuse to seek an understanding with them. I intend to do everything I can to persuade them of our peaceful intent, to remind them that it was the West that refused to use its nuclear monopoly in the 40s and 50s for territorial gain. and which now proposes 50% cut in strategic ballistic missiles and the elimination of an entire class of land-based intermediate-range nuclear missiles. At the same time, however, they must be made to understand we will never compromise our principles and standards. We will never give away our freedom. We will never abandon our belief in God. We will never stop searching for a genuine peace, but we can assure none of these things America stands for through the so-called nuclear freeze solutions proposed by some. The truth is that a freeze now would be a very dangerous fraud, for that is merely the illusion of peace. The reality is that we must find peace through strength. I would agree to a freeze if only we could freeze the Soviets' global desires. A freeze at current levels of weapons would remove any incentive for the Soviets to negotiate seriously in Geneva and virtually end our chances to achieve the major arms reductions which we have proposed. Instead, they would achieve their objectives through the freeze. A freeze would reward the Soviet Union for its enormous and unparalleled military buildup. It would prevent the essential and long overdue modernization of United States and Allied defenses and would lead...
All right, folks, welcome back to the program. Thanks so much for being with us. Coming up at 7:33, we'll be talking with State Representative Josh Miller. I'm going to ask him for a zero-interest loan because, you know, he's really in with that healthcare industry. They really love him, and they give him tons of money because, you know, he's all for Medicaid expansion and everything else. So I'm hoping he can give me a zero-interest loan that I you know, will never report. And, well, maybe I'll report it when I'm called out on it. Hey, are there any other legislators that are getting money or have gotten money from other legislators? This, you know, it's like this. Apparently, there's an intra-legislator bank down there at the Marble Palace, and they're all little loan officers down there. Yeah, it's the good old boy intra-legislator bank. That is a parody. Will you write that down? The good old boy intra-legislator bank, looking out for ourselves and no one else. Once you get elected, you become a loan officer. The phone number 870-275-9799. Josh Miller coming up next.
Our aging forces increasingly vulnerable. And an honest freeze would require extensive prior negotiations on the systems and numbers to be limited and on the measures to ensure effective verification and compliance. And the kind of a freeze that has been suggested would be virtually impossible to verify. Such a major effort would divert us completely from our current negotiations on achieving substantial reductions. A number of years ago, I heard a young father, a very prominent young man in the entertainment world, addressing a tremendous gathering in California. It was during the time of the Cold War, and communism and our own way of life were very much on people's minds, and he was speaking to that subject. And suddenly, though, I heard him saying, I love my little girls more than anything, and I said to myself, oh no, don't say that. But I had underestimated him. He went on, I would rather see my little girls die now, still believing in God, than have them grow up under communism and one day die no longer believing in God. There were thousands of young people in that audience. They came to their feet with shouts of joy. They had instantly recognized the profound truth in what he had said with regard to the physical and the soul and what was truly important. Yes, let us pray for the salvation of all of those who live in that totalitarian darkness. Pray they will discover the joy of knowing God. But until they do, let us be aware that while they preach the supremacy of the state, declare its omnipotence over individual man, and predict its eventual domination of all peoples on the earth, they are the focus of evil in the modern world. It was C.S. Lewis who, in his unforgettable screw tape letters, wrote, "The greatest evil is not done now in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not even done in concentration camps and labor camps. In those, we see its final result. But it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted in clear, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voice." Well, because these quiet men do not raise their voices, because they sometimes speak in soothing tones of brotherhood and peace, because like other dictators before them, they're always making their final territorial demand, some would have us accept them at their word and accommodate ourselves to their aggressive impulses. But if history teaches anything, it teaches that simple-minded appeasement or wishful thinking about our adversaries is folly. It means the betrayal of our past, the squandering of our freedom. So I urge you to speak out against those who would place the United States in a position of military and moral inferiority. You know, I've always believed that old Screwtape reserved his best efforts for those of you in the church. So in your discussions of the nuclear freeze proposals, I urge you to beware the temptation of pride, the temptation of blithely declaring yourselves above it all and label both sides equally at fault, to ignore the facts of history and the aggressive impulses of an evil empire, to simply call the arms race a giant misunderstanding, and thereby remove yourself from the struggle between right and wrong and good and evil.
All right, folks, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the program on this Johnny Cash Friday. We appreciate you being with us. Hey, welcome back. We've got State Representative Josh Miller from the District 66. Josh, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning, Paul. Thanks for having me on.
Yes, sir. It's always great to have you on. First of all, you killed any deer yet?
I have. I killed one Saturday afternoon, and so I've been lucky. Been very lucky.
So last Saturday you killed one. I mean, wasn't it like 1,000 degrees outside or something? A lot of people didn't even go. Man,
it was raining and cool. It was just about perfect. But you got to be tough, and you got to be tough or dumb, one or the other.
Okay. Well, I guess it did rain. Did it rain last weekend? I guess it did. I can't remember, but I know that a lot of people have been complaining about how hot it is. I mean, right now it's perfect. So, that's good. Okay, well, Josh, can I have a loan? Is that something that I can have, a loan from you?
Well, No, because you're not in the legislature, nor are you a former legislator, so that kind of rules that out. But I was going to ask you for a loan, then I thought, no, you're not in the legislature, so that won't look right.
Yeah. In order for it to look good, you need legislators loaning each other money and not disclosing it until, of course, they have to disclose it because the reporters come and knocking.
Right. Yeah, it's an amazing thing to me. I don't get it.
I was just saying before the break that there's there's really like an intra legislator bank down there that nobody's known about. I still don't think we're to the bottom of it. Josh, I mean, what's going on here? The people, in all seriousness, I mean, with all the corruption, and now we're figuring this out. I mean, a Democrat loaned the Republican Speaker of the House $16,000, then got a committee chairmanship out. I mean, how are we not supposed to really be disappointed in all of this?
Well, here's the thing. I think that it is, I've been a legislator for 6 years now, or finishing up my 6th year. And I didn't know about all this stuff. Of course, I'm out of the loop. But, it is possible and I'm just, this is my take on it, my opinion. I haven't talked to anybody. I don't know any of the details. But it's possible for people to develop friendships, serve together, work together, develop friendships. Somebody gets in a bind. Their friend loans them money, whatever. That happens. And the fact of the business is we might not even be giving this a second thought at all if it hadn't been for all of the corruption and all the other stuff that's going on. Now, it doesn't look good any way you slice it. It doesn't look good, but it's really sad that and again, I don't know, but it could be completely pure, everything fine, everything on the up and up, and it's just a bunch of friends down there loaning each other money, which I don't necessarily get all of it, but the public doesn't view it like that because we've seen everybody going to prison and getting indicted and all the corruption, and I don't know, that whole place down there stinks. I think when you start getting to within about when you cross the river bridge, going down into Little Rock, getting close to the Capitol, it just starts smelling a little bit like bull manure.
I was wondering. I was like, "What's he gonna say? What's he gonna say?" Come
on,
I was on
the radio. One of the F companies, the DC.
Yeah,
they're going to monitor all that.
FCC. Yeah, no,
yeah,
you're
FCC.
right.
I knew it was one of the F words. I wasn't sure.
All right, we're talking with State Representative Josh Miller. I mean, you're right. It doesn't look good. I will say that the biggest problem with Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum getting the $16,000 from Joe Jett is that it wasn't disclosed. So legislators can certainly loan each other money, and we can say that it looks bad all day long, and they shouldn't do it because it looks terrible. And you guys are obviously the most powerful people in Arkansas, right? How you vote, is going to affect the lives of others. But if you're going to do it, at least disclose it. I mean, Josh, could you imagine if it had come out in real time? Which I can't remember the exact date, but if it had come out in real time that Democrat Joe Jett gave Republican Speaker of the House Jeremy Gillum $16,000, and then yada, 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 got to keep his committee chairmanship once he switched to the Republican Party, Joe Jett, I think there might have been a revolt even among kind of rank-and-file Republicans.
That you would be assuming that rank and file Republicans would actually want to stand up and fight about something, and so I don't know if that would happen. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It wouldn't look good. Now, Jeremy Gillum is a good friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, And I hate to see this. I want to put the absolute. I want to believe that everything is in the clear. But what I don't get is I had reporters calling me. Oh, I don't know, a couple 3 months ago when I'm trying to work, and Mike Wickline, Democrat Gazette, I think maybe it was just him, calling me because on my statement of financial interest, I couldn't figure out how to disclose the fact that I had went to Foundation of Government Accountability conference. And I went down there and spoke. It was in Florida, and I think I was put up in a motel for a couple of nights, and they paid me some mileage since I couldn't fly. And anyway, so I mean, our Little Rock media was greatly concerned about the fact that here's Miller over here really trying to pull one over on the taxpayers, on the public. I'm not I didn't disclose. I made an error, and we're talking about, I don't know. I don't remember. I think that even after I got reimbursed and all that stuff, that trip still only cost me, $500 or $1,000. But that's the mindset down there. And then the media doesn't want to report this until they just absolutely have to. And you've got, I don't know, how many legislators, how many loans has there been made aware of now between legislators?
You've got the one between Gillum or Joe Jett and Gillum. Then you got one between Charlie Collins and Nate Bell of over $12,500. So we don't know. And of course, Charlie was getting $1,000 interest off of the deal. So you got to assume that's a pretty sizable amount. Then, of course, you got the $4,000 that Jim Hendren gave convicted felon Jake Files to cover hot checks at the request of Senator Bart Hester. That's so far. I think that's all we know of. I may be leaving one out, but I think there's more to come, though, possibly, Josh.
Well, I have not loaned anybody any money, nor have I borrowed any money.
Well, there you
go. But if there's some folks down there that's wanting to loan out a lot of money interest-free, sign me up.
Well, hey, say what you want to about Charlie Collins, but he's charging interest. The others maybe not so much. So
that's right.
Charlie hasn't completely abandoned his capitalist tendencies. Because he's a capitalist. Maybe there's hope there.
Well, or opportunist, either one.
Right.
Kudos to Charlie for that. Like I said, if there hadn't been all the other stuff going on, and we hadn't known, the whole deal with Jake Files and Mike and Neil and all these others that have just, where folks have just completely taken the trust of the public. We're not talking about how they vote on issues or whatever, but absolutely taken the trust of the public and wadded it up and thrown it out the window and then rolled over it. If all that hadn't happened, then this loan story may not even be anything, and people might not even care. But
I think you're right.
Been the case.
No, I think you're right. I think I would agree with you. If the corruption wasn't in the headlines every single day, I don't think anybody would really care much about this. I would probably care, but the mainstream media certainly wouldn't care. But they're caring now. I'm wondering if this is not an attempt to get out ahead of what may be disclosed as a result of FBI investigations. Like I said, I think there's more out there, more to come out there. But we'll see. Hey, let me ask you this. I haven't had you on. We're talking with State Representative Josh Miller. I haven't had you on since the sentencing of John Woods. John Woods getting 18 years. And that is certainly a signal that Judge Tim Brooks was trying to send to folks down there saying, hey, if you do this, we're going to throw the book at you. What are your thoughts?
I say throw the book and the shelf the book was sitting on at whoever has done this stuff. Man, look, it's not too hard to do the right thing down there. It's just not that hard to do the right thing. And I don't, I don't know. And maybe it's just, hey, I've never, and I thank the Lord for it, because I know if not for the grace of God, there go I on anything. And I've never been presented with an opportunity. Nobody's ever come to me and said, hey, Josh, if you'll get us a grant, we'll get you some cash. And, that's never happened with me.
Well, that's because they know what your answer would be. That's because they know what your answer would be.
Well, and I hope so. But I'm just saying, I can't say I've ever been in that position and said no, because I've never been in that position. But we're given a responsibility when we're elected to at least conduct ourselves honestly and honorably with and try to be good stewards of the people's money. And we may all disagree on political issues. We may fight back and forth. Do we expand Medicaid? Do we not? Do we do this? Do we do that? All that stuff that can be hashed out in the process. People can get mad, whatever. But ultimately, you're not supposed to be stealing money from the people. And so if you do that, I work incredibly hard to pay the taxes that I pay. And as a taxpayer, it makes me extremely agitated to know that some crooked individual would be profiting personally off of my tax dollars and stealing money from the public. And so if you're doing that, then go to prison for 18 years or longer. I don't care.
Yeah, I can't believe that you're not. I mean, I thought we were friends, Josh, and you're not giving me a loan. I'm really offended, but I'll get over it in time.
Hey, run for the legislature. You got 2 years or whatever. I'm however long we might could be.
So
in there.
I have you on the record. If I ran for the legislature and we served together, you're going to give me money.
I will give you a loan 1 year if you can turn around and give me one the next year.
Okay. And we are joking, just so everybody knows.
No, I'm serious about getting a loan from you.
State Representative Josh Miller, it's always great to have you on. Happy hunting, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Hey, thanks a lot, Paul.
All righty, thank you. Hey, it's Johnny Cash Friday. We're going to go to break. I'm going to recap some of this Kavanaugh stuff when we come back.
The National Association of Evangelicals community from coast to coast in our great land deeply appreciates and values his love for the truth of the Bible and his commitment to its great moral values. Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States, Ronald Reagan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And Reverend clergy all, Senator Hawkins, distinguished members of the Florida Congressional delegation, and all of you, I can't tell you how you have warmed my heart with your welcome. I'm delighted to be here today. Those of you in the National Association of Evangelicals are known for your spiritual and humanitarian work. And I would be especially remiss if I didn't discharge right now one personal debt of gratitude. Thank you for your prayers. Nancy and I have felt their presence many times in many ways. And believe me, for us, they've made all the difference. The other day, in the East Room of the White House at a meeting there, someone asked me whether I was aware of all the people out there who were praying for the president. And I had to say, yes, I am. I've felt it. I believe in intercessionary prayer. But I couldn't help but say to that questioner after he'd asked the question that, or at least say to them that if sometimes when he was praying he got a busy signal, it was just me in there ahead of him.
If you believe the Second Amendment protects your right to defend your home with a firearm, where do you turn if the government confiscates your gun? To the courthouse. The Founding Fathers created your Seventh Amendment right to a civil jury to protect your freedoms. The courthouse is where you fight the overreaching hand of government. And the Brad Hendricks Law Firm is where the fight starts. Call the Brad Hendricks Law Firm at 501-221-0444. The Brad Hendricks Law Firm in Little Rock, standing ready using the Seventh Amendment to protect your Second Amendment rights. Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
I think I understand how Abraham Lincoln felt when he said, "I have been driven many times to my knees by the overwhelming conviction that I had nowhere else to go." From the joy and the good feeling of this conference, I go to a political reception. Now, I don't know why, but that bit of scheduling reminds me of a story. Which I'll share with you. An evangelical minister and a politician arrived at Heaven's Gate one day together. And St. Peter, after doing all the necessary formalities, took them in hand to show them where their quarters would be. And he took them to a small single room with a bed, a chair, and a table, and said this was for the clergyman. And the politician was a little worried about what might be in store for him. And he couldn't believe it then when St. Peter stopped in front of a beautiful mansion with lovely grounds, many servants, and told him that...
And we are winding things down. This might be the day, yesterday might have been the day that Lindsey Graham saved America, saved the Supreme Court, and also saved America. Listen. No,
Are
I'm
you
dead
aware
serious.
that at 9:23 on the night of July the 9th, the day you were nominated to the Supreme Court by President Trump, Senator Schumer said, 23 minutes after your nomination, "I will oppose Judge Kavanaugh's nomination with everything I have. I have a bipartisan, and I hope a bipartisan Majority will do the same. The stakes are simply too high for anything less. Well, if you weren't aware of it, you are now. Did you meet with Senator Dianne Feinstein on August 20th?
I did meet with Senator Feinstein.
Did you know that her staff had already recommended a lawyer to Dr. Ford?
I did not know that.
Did you know that her and her staff had this allegations for over 20 days?
I did not know that at the time.
If you wanted an FBI investigation, you could have come to us. What you want to do is destroy this guy's life, hold this seat open, and hope you win in 2020. You've said that, not me. You've got nothing to apologize for. When you see Sotomayor and Kagan, tell them that Lindsay said hello, because I voted for them. I would never do to them what you've done to this guy. This is the most unethical sham since I've been in politics. And if you really wanted to know the truth, you sure as hell wouldn't have done what you've done to this guy. Are you a gang rapist?
No.
I cannot imagine what you and your family have gone through. Boy, y'all want power. God, I hope you never get it. I hope the American people can see through this sham, that you knew about it and you held it. You had no intention of protecting Dr. Ford. None. She's as much of a victim as you are.
Look at Feinstein's face.
God, I hate to say it, because these have been my friends. But let me tell you, when it comes to this, you're looking for a fair process. You came to the wrong town at the wrong time, my friend. Do you consider this a job interview?
The advice and consent role is like a job interview.
You consider that you've been through a job interview?
I've been through a process of advice and consent under the Constitution.
Would you say you've been through hell?
I've been through hell and then some.
This is not a job interview.
Yeah.
This is hell.
This
is going to destroy the ability of good people to come forward because of this crap. Your high school yearbook. You have interacted with professional women all your life, not one accusation. You're supposed to be Bill Cosby when you're a junior and senior in high school. And all of a sudden you got over it. It's been my understanding that if you drug women and rape them for 2 years in high school, you probably don't stop. Here's my understanding. If you lived a good life, people would recognize it, like the American Bar Association has the gold standard.
Stop. This, I'm telling
His
you,
integrity.
it goes on. This was an incredible moment. The whole thing, we talked about this a lot in the first hour, gave you a little bit more perspective on this, but it's going to be interesting to see what the left does. As I check the headlines at the very end here, I have still no indication that differs from, as of right now, still have no indication that differs from the town hall article that was posted last night saying that it looks like the committee and the full Senate has the votes to confirm Brett Kavanaugh. They cited sources on the Capitol, at the Capitol, that says Senator Flake, Collins, Murkowski, and Democrat Joe Manchin are expected to vote in favor of Kavanaugh. Bob Corker came out in a tweet and said he's voting for Kavanaugh. If this is in fact true, then it looks like it's going to be a very interesting weekend. And there'll be plenty of stuff for plenty of stupid things that liberals will say on the Sunday talk shows. Get ready for that. We'll see you Monday, Arkansas. Be safe. Have a great weekend.